Good deal. We've got some good people hopping in too. And there's a couple people in particular that we've had conversations this week where I was like, well, guess what? We have the perfect topic for you on Friday, right?
Awesome.
Yeah, awesome. This is good. Bill's in the house.
Who's this Bill guy?
Who is this Bill guy? Hannah, good to see you. Casey, good to see you. Very good. We're going to wait just a little bit and let a couple more people in per usual. And as people are joining in, I've said this in the past, but I always like to remind you that if there's a specific topic that you're like, my God, why won't she pull someone in to talk about this? I'm always all ears, bring it on, right? So if there is something in particular that you're like, my market center is always talking about this, my whatever it might be, we're always talking about this as a team, let me know and we'll find that expert to bring them in. Cool. Okay, we're just going to give it just one more brief moment. And if you are able to be on video, hey, Amy, how's it going? Go ahead and pull yourself onto video. And we are going to have a good chunk of time for Q&A because this topic, I think, it really lends itself really well to getting into the weeds, right? And really asking some questions. And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. Is everyone cool with that? Matt, you ready to roll?
You know I am.
Okay.
Of course I am.
Always. He always is. So we've got Matt Koller in the house today. Matt is a premier MAPS coach working with PC coaches in particular. And what I think is so freaking cool about that is who all has interacted with the PC at some point in their career? Yeah. In some way, shape, or form. Bill's like, I am a PC. I have interacted with the PC. Yeah. So at some point in our career, we've all interacted with the PC, whether directly or through our team or whatever it might be. And the number one thing that a PC is focused on is what, Matt?
Getting agents into production.
What kind of agents?
As quickly as possible. Brand new agents. Well as experienced agents, really anybody whose business is slipping.
That's fair. So the focus is getting agents into production as quickly as possible, right? And so Matt's going to talk to us about, as someone who has been a PC and who coaches, how many PCs do you coach?
I'm at just a tick under 50 at the moment.
So Matt has his pulse in 50 different market centers, essentially, is what he is saying, right? So I think he knows a little something about getting folks into the psychology of production, right? So Matt, what did I not tell them about you? And I'm going to go ahead and spotlight you too, so that they can actually see you, that we need to know going into this conversation.
Sounds good. I don't know that there's much necessarily, other than the fact that when our agents are not getting into production, I would venture to guess that it is really not based on the tactical. It's not that they don't have the right lead generation strategy, or it's not that they don't have their schedule set the way that it is. It's so much deeper than that. So when Leah asked me to come on here, I jotted down really, I think, 7 key points, 7 things that we should be focusing on as rainmakers that will help our agents get into production. I love the fact that Mr. Bill Lawton's on this call. He's a partner in crime of mine. We host a call every Friday for PCs that's on this exact topic. So Bill, if you have anything you want to jump in, you have blanket permission to add whatever you'd like to this conversation. So the first thing that I would encourage everyone to look at, I have to assume everybody has buyer's agents or junior agents on your team. So you have people that you're in charge of. Yes. Okay. So the first thing that we have to look at with all of our people is we have to help them find their motivation. See, I have a firm belief that there is no such thing as an unmotivated agent. Every agent has a motivation. If they're breathing, if they're not in a coma, there's a motivation somewhere. What we have to do as leaders and as coaches is to uncover what is that motivation and help them see that real estate is the best vehicle for them to achieve whatever it is that they're truly passionate about. I've told this story in the past where I had somebody who was in my productivity coaching program when I was in the role, and he was in his late 60s, and he was a really sweet guy, showed up to everything, but he didn't have a strong motivation for real estate because he had been a successful real estate agent in another market and had basically made enough to retire. And so he was just doing it to stay busy, but he wasn't really doing what he needed to do. And so by digging in deeper with him on what was important to him, I talked about, I didn't even go into the tactical of real estate. I just said, tell me what is most important to you in your life. And instantly he said, my grandkids. He said, I moved to Colorado to be with my grandkids, to be with my son. And, I do real estate because I don't want to just sit around and watch TV all day, but I don't need to make money. And so we dug in a little bit deeper with him, and we found that what he really cared about was making sure that his grandkids were taken care of the best that they could be. And his son was basically living paycheck to paycheck. So I asked him, I said, if you had to put odds on it, what are the odds that your kids or that your grandkids go to college if they don't get a full ride scholarship? He said next to zero. And I said, what if everything you did in real estate today was to put them through school? That was the thing. Instantly he was on fire. I mean, that guy worked harder than anybody I ever saw, just because he had clarity of purpose in that moment. So with your agents, I would encourage you to figure out what is behind the motivation. It's not money, right? Money is a tool. It's a vehicle. It's something that you use. Nobody is motivated for money. The deeper you understand your people, the better you'll be able to touch on what's important to them. Diana Kokoska, when she was running MAPS, had shared a strategy with us that I have kept in my coaching repertoire ever since. And this is something that I would like everybody to write down on this call because it's useful. The first thing that you do is you ask your people, what is their goal? What's important to them? Their goal might be 12 months from now. It might be 3 years from now. Whatever their goal is, that's not really the important part. Just what is your goal? Then the next question that you ask is, what is important about that for you? Whatever that answer is, you base the next question on that. And the next question is, and what will that do for you? And whatever they say, what's important about that? And then what will that do for you? And then the same set of questions one more time. And what's important about that? And ultimately, what will that do for you? Now, Bill, I know that's something that you've used in the past. What comes up for you when you ask those types of questions?
Well, if you don't ask the follow-up questions, you never really get off the surface, right? They'll give you a very generalized answer. And so by asking for what you're really asking for is clarity in the form of why is that important to you, or what's important to you about that. And so you just keep going deeper, and eventually by the time, sometimes you can keep going until they just run out of answers. But it's about gaining clarity, getting to the truth.
And a lot of times you'll get some really deep answers in that conversation. You might get things like, when I was growing up, my dad used to tell me that I would never amount to anything. And now I want to be successful to prove him wrong. I mean, you touch on something like that, that's going to put them on fire way more than, $100,000, right? The deeper you understand what's behind their goal, the better you'll be able to touch on that. Not beat them over the head. This is not a tool to, abuse them with, but it's hey, I know that you want to get out of your parents' basement in the next 6 months. Based on what you did yesterday, did we move closer to that goal or further away from that goal? Right? Just understanding what's important to them. The second point I'd like to make is, and this pertains especially for brand new agents. Okay. Tell them what to do. I know that sounds pretty obvious, but I don't think people take that to the extent that they need to. It's important to remember that our people, especially when they first start in real estate, they have no context. And a lot of times we let the curse of knowledge take over, which, if you've ever heard of the curse of knowledge, that's when we understand something, when we've internalized something, it's very difficult for us to remember that other people, it's not internalized for them, right? You talk about time blocking to somebody who's not in real estate, they may or may not know what you're talking about. And yet it's so ingrained into all of us. I'm not saying we're all perfect at it, but at least we know what time blocking is and the concept behind it, right? And so the more that we can give them clarity, the better. One of the things I encourage productivity coaches to do is to develop their playbook. The playbook being the 5 lead generation strategies that they could employ that would cause them to find a piece of business in the first 30 days. And the key with this is that each and every word that they would say in the dialogue is exactly written out. See, I hear a lot of productivity coaches say things like, oh, just call your database, tell them you're in real estate. Well, if they did that, it would literally sound like, hi, Leah, I'm in real estate. And then we wonder why they're not taking action, because if there's not clarity of action, or I'm sorry, clarity of purpose and exactly what they need to do and say, they won't take action. So that's really more for your brand new agents. But don't assume that you want to give them 100% of the details. Don't assume that they're just going to fill in the blanks on you. Okay. Third thing that I wrote down is to lead by example. See, there's and I'm speaking mostly to productivity coaches, but really rainmakers, it's the exact same conversation. Our agents expect us to do what we say and not what we do. And then we wonder why they're not taking action. You know, it's one of my favorite quotes from a MAPS coach I highly respect, Deb Jolly, is she says that your actions are so loud that they can't hear what you're saying. If you expect them to lead generate every day, you should be right there with them, shoulder to shoulder. And I recognize that some of you, that might not be your number one goal, right? You might be at a place in your business where you're not doing the day-to-day lead generation. I would still encourage you to lead generate for something. It doesn't matter if they're doing the exact same script and dialogue as you. They need to see that you're putting the type of effort in that you expect from them. Lead generate together, create a team environment. And we're going to touch on that a little bit later, but make sure everybody is together and we're all know that we have one purpose for the day, whether that's setting an appointment or setting 2 appointments or setting a listing appointment. Whatever the goal is, everybody knows their clarity of purpose and what to do. I'm going to stop here because I don't want to just talk for just endlessly for an hour. Bill, Leah, anything to add to what we talked about so far, or any questions or comments so far?
Yeah, I'm loving this thus far. And I've got a couple of questions. And if you guys have questions, either pull yourself off of mute, feel free to jump in, or throw it in the chat box and I'm happy to read that out too. You're welcome to send a direct message if you're shy, though. There's no need to be shy. When it comes to the going deep, that Diana Kokoska script of, and what's important to you about that, and ultimately what will that get you? Is that uncomfortable?
It can be. It can be uncomfortable if they aren't willing to put themselves out there, right? I mean, so a lot of that, I believe, has to do with the type of rapport that you've built with them. Leah, anything that you would add to that, or anything specifically there?
Well, I'm thinking to myself, I know I had a conversation with a rainmaker earlier this week that was talking about a coaching conversation she was having with an agent, and the agent was just shut down. And from the last conversation that they had, that they were very open and willing to speak about what they were looking to do. And we were having a discussion around how do we break that down. And so I was curious if there was something, maybe you do have rapport, maybe it's a brand new agent and you don't have rapport yet. What do you do when that other person just gets shut down?
I wish I could give you just the one word quick fix answer on that. I would say one thing that's extremely important, obviously, is in the KPA process, make sure that you're doing the life story with them. That's a great way to microwave rapport quickly. Because then when you go into those conversations, you can draw on some of that from the life story. And I think one thing is your people need to know that you're not going to beat them over the head with the things that they're putting themselves out there. Mm-hmm. Right. I made that point earlier and I really want to emphasize that. right? If it took a lot for them to admit something, like my dad used to tell me that I was a complete failure and was never going to amount to anything. And then you start taking that piece of information and you start hitting them with it in future conversations. If you weaponize that, so to speak, you might as well fire them, because they'll never trust you again. They'll never open up to you again. They need to know that even though you're their boss, that you also care about them and that you want what's best for them. Bill, anything that you would add to that?
Yeah, ask for permission. Body language is a really important thing to pay attention to. So if they have that closed down look on their face, that they're kind of just, they're there but not there, ask for permission. Hey, can I ask you a question? You seem disengaged from the conversation. Tell me what's going on.
Yeah, I love that.
One other thing, actually, I would also recommend is go first. If you want them to be vulnerable, then you should be vulnerable first. Right?
Well, vulnerability is a strength, not a weakness.
It is.
And
it's
it
one of
creates
the best connection tools you can use.
it creates a level of permission that you can't get any other way.
Yep. They don't want to know that you are perfect. They want to know that you are a person, that you're human, that you struggle with some of the things that they do, and that you're only in your position because you worked hard at overcoming those obstacles that they face.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said. And
Awesome.
I do think that goes unnoticed a lot of times. It does seem like some of the high-powered folks that I work with, there is that sense of, I need to portray some sort of sense of perfection, and you don't.
No, yeah, it's actually the best way to repel your people, because then they start comparing your image of perfection to what they feel, right? It's the bold law of don't compare your insides to other people's outsides. Well, if you focus hard on being the perfect image, you will have no connection with your people, and then you'll wonder why you have turnover. So, all right. So the fourth point I wrote down was to be tough on your standards, but not on your people. Okay. And what that has to do with is your standards, whatever you choose to accept becomes your standard. And so when you state publicly standards of, we close two deals per month per agent in this team, and yet when that doesn't happen and there's no consequences to that, that ultimately becomes your standard. And when setting standards with your agents, it's important to be explicit. These are the standards. These are standards that every person on the team is expected to meet, including myself. And that this is how we operate. And you can almost treat it like the team regulates the standards as opposed to the rainmaker. See, when you don't have explicit standards, then any conflict becomes personal. When you have clearly defined standards, there's no such thing as a personal conflict. It's a standard violation. That's it. One thing I think rainmakers make a mistake on, and if this is you, just understand I'm not attacking you. Breathe. Just consider an alternative. I think a lot of rainmakers make their standards outcome-based, and I think that's a mistake, right? A standard of 2 closings per month, that's an outcome. And unfortunately, that's an outcome that we don't always get to control. When you're coaching somebody, you want to coach them primarily on the actions they can take, trusting that those actions will lead to the results. So personally, I would recommend action-based standards like X number of appointments or Y number of agreements, or you've grown your database by fill in the blank, as opposed to you've had 2 closings this month. I remember I used to be on a team. I was a lead buyer specialist on a team. And I remember one of the things that really caused a huge rift between me and my rainmaker was he had a standard of 2 closings per month. And there was one particular month that I had 3 closings that were set up to happen in that particular month. And for some reason, all three blew up. One of them had lost their job a week before closing. One of them, I forget what all the issues were, but those were things that were completely outside of my control. And then I got put on probation by my rainmaker because those deals that were supposed to close didn't end up closing, even though I had no control over the process. That was the beginning of the end. I think I left his team probably 3 months after that because I felt like that was an unfair standard. So create standards that your people have 100% control over. Yeah.
I'm going to pause there for just a second because I think
Please.
that's a really big mic drop moment. Does anyone have any questions directly related to that? How does that look in practice? How do you hold people accountable to the leading indicators? Or we're processing it? This is not a microwave moment. This is a slow cooker moment.
Well, I know I'm throwing a lot at y'all, so these are things that we've learned over the course of years. So
We'll
Yeah,
circle
I
back
think,
around. Go ahead, Amy.
I think this is awesome. I completely get what you're saying because I do have a standard of 2 per month. I look at it more as a quarter than a month, like kind of a whole picture. But whenever somebody's not hitting their 2 per month, I think they have a tendency to be like, well, the leads that came through were bad leads and, they were disqualified and they can't buy. And, now we're into the excuse mode instead of really looking at, well, what actions did you take to make this business happen? How many prospecting calls did you make? How many buyers consultations? How many buyer agreements? Let's look at the root of the cause, not the outcome, to fix the behavior.
Amy, thank you so much for saying that, because that is such a great point, because the outcomes tend to get them focusing outward, right? Because there's a lot of outcomes that are based on other things happening. Lender, title, the buyers, the listing agent, the whatever, right? There's so many different factors that go into it. Only they can take ownership of their own actions. And a big tenet of coaching is that we teach people how to think, right? This comes directly from Gary Keller, that a leader and coach's job is to teach people how to think so they can do what they need to do in order to get what they want when they want it. Part of teaching them how to think is teaching them to think in personal ownership, right? I heard a great quote from MAPS coach Jordan Freed in that a coach's job is to link people's decisions to their vision, right? Their vision of what they want in the future and how every single day they make decisions that either move them closer to that goal or further away from that goal. So if we can get them recognizing those decisions and are they moving themselves closer, I mean, that's a standard to hold. So
2 mic drop moments on one point there, Matt. Those are some beautiful quotes there.
Thank you. I am good at ripping off other people, essentially. So that's one of my talents. Number 5, celebrate failure. This goes back to that perfection moment. Okay. Your people will trust you when they know that they don't have to be perfect. And so, I know that some of you have probably been on stage with Gary or been featured in regional masterminds or featured fill in the blank. Leave your perfection on stage. It's okay to look perfect there. With your people, they want you to look messy and real and vulnerable, to Bill's point, right? They will trust you a lot deeper when they know that there are flaws, and it's okay. We all have flaws, and it's not about necessarily celebrating our shortcomings, but it's about celebrating the fact that we have shortcomings and we take action to correct them. And all of us are on a constant journey towards improvement. I know that's a big part of my coaching with my clients, is they know that the only reason I got to where I am is because I figured out 1,000 ways to do it wrong and learned along the way. So one of the points that I had written down is don't punish a swing and a miss. Punish a called strike 3. Now in baseball, a called strike 3 is when you're sitting in the batter's box and they throw the pitch and you leave the bat on your shoulder. If you don't take action, if you don't take a swing, if I was coaching baseball, I'd say swing and miss and give it your all, right? If your people take it, if they decide, I'm going to go door knock 100 doors, and they come back and they're completely deflated because they knocked on 100 doors and they got yelled at 30 times and they got no leads and blah, blah, blah. Celebrate that. Hey, you did it. You went out there. That's awesome. You bleeding? You got bruises? You got any bones sticking out? No, you survived. Awesome. What did you learn from that? Let's dig into that, right? Celebrate failure, because failure is feedback, right? The only true failure in life is quitting. Otherwise, it's just a stepping stone along the way. So celebrate with them. Be excited about that. If you get them to feel comfortable with failure, they will learn and improve that much faster. Bill, do you have anything that you would add to that?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite topics. It's so celebrating the failure could also be said in celebrating the little wins, right? We get so focused on beating ourselves up for things that don't go right, and then we don't do anything when those little things do go right. And so helping your people celebrate the little wins, because if you don't celebrate them, those losses or those trips that knock you down and then you got to get back up, those become bigger and bigger, or they feel bigger and bigger. So help them celebrate the little things that go right, because you start stacking little things on top of little things and all of a sudden you've got a whole roster full of new clients to work with, right? Yep. Just by celebrating those little wins, one little step at a time.
Exactly. Leah, anything to add to that?
Yeah, when I was the director of sales for the team that I was a part of, we actually we called it Fail Forward Fridays. And every Friday we all expected it. We on our call, because we did a power up call every morning. Fridays were dedicated to failures. And it was really, to your point of perfectionism and breaking that down too, a lot of times it was our senior members of the team that were pumped up and excited to bring a failure to the call, right? So it wasn't just the rainmaker who was being held in a human status, right? Who is someone that could be viewed as approachable and whatnot, but it was also your peers. There was no one that suddenly was like this high and mighty, oh my gosh, Matt is the director of sales and he just can't do anything wrong. We were all able to collaborate in the failures, which made all of us stronger and better too.
Yep. One of my best attended group coaching sessions that I ever did when I was a PC is called "Where Did Matt Screw Up?" And I would tell stories of deals that I've done, and just tell the whole story, and I'd say, okay, where did I screw up? What did I mess up? And so A, it showed that I was vulnerable and human, and B, it got them thinking critically about situations and helping them identify pitfalls and helping them potentially prevent those pitfalls from happening in their own business. So for whatever that was worked out, that was a standing room only type event. I would do that about once a quarter and they loved it. So so celebrate failure. Number 6, lead with curiosity. Okay. Lead with curiosity. Anytime you have an agent who is not doing what they are supposed to be doing, it's either a skill problem or it's a mindset problem. Okay. It's probably not tactical, especially if you've trained them. Now, if that's their first day on the job, they don't know what they don't know. So it probably is tactical, right? There's a formula that I like to share. This comes from the book, The Inner Game of Tennis, which, spoiler alert, is not about tennis. It's actually about mindset. And it goes performance equals potential minus interference. Now, I hammer this point home with productivity coaches. They need to know this because this is the coaching formula. Performance equals potential minus interference. The dumbed down Matt version of saying that is what happened equals what could have happened minus what got in the way. A different, more coachy way of saying this is think about performance as results. You set 3 appointments, you set 0 appointments, you set 12 appointments. Your results are your results. They are what they are, right? Under potential, right skill set. And under interference, right mindset. Now, touching on the skill set piece, think about all of your agents as having a very solid ceiling of achievement. They can only hit against their ceiling of achievement. It's concrete. They're not going to bust through. There's only so much that they can do. Now, the good news is that ceiling can be raised very easily, but it takes time and effort and studying and role playing and practice and failure and feedback to increase that ceiling of potential. And so our job as leaders is to develop their skill set. And for those of you with large teams, one of the best ways to do that is in group. And that's through hands-on application. That's through role plays and objection handling rapid fire, and hey, let's grab your computer. Here's a random address. Let's create a CMA together and let's talk through it, right? It is hands-on application stuff. It's not you just standing up and lecturing them for an hour, right? And then interference, that is best handled individually. And so in your conversations with your people, you have to understand that there are always 2 problems. There's the problem that presents itself, and there's the real problem that's beneath that problem. And a lot of leaders, unfortunately, chase the wrong problem, right? If one of your people comes to you and says, I got like 5 contacts done last week, and just my schedule was so busy. We might think that we're giving value by saying, okay, well, let's dig in on your schedule. Let's look at your time blocking. And no, that's not the real problem. They know how to time block it. It's about what did they allow to get in the way? What are they not saying no to? Who are they attempting to impress? There's so many deeper facets of that, and it's important that we dig in, right? One question that comes from the book, The Coaching Habit, which I would encourage everybody on this call, even though you're not coaches, you are coaches by default. As a rainmaker, you are a coach. So I would encourage everybody to pick up the book, The Coaching Habit. I make every new productivity coach I work with read it because it is a foundational piece. And one of the questions that they ask in that book is, what is the real challenge for you here? That question can help you cut through a lot of the BS. Kind of like I was saying before, avoid tactics, avoid strategy, avoid advice. There are times and places for those, but if you know anything about pitching in baseball, if you throw the same pitch every single time, eventually as a pitcher, you're going to get clobbered because they know what to expect. There's no variety. You have to mix up the pitches, change-ups, fastballs, sliders, curves. You got to mix it up. If we just go to advice, if we just go to tactical, if we just go to lead generation strategies, it's eventually they're going to tune you out because it's the same stuff. If you can help them discover what the real problem is, and then help them decide what they want to do about that, empower them in the process as opposed to telling them what they need to do to fix it, they're going to go a lot further with that. Bill, I know this is a huge topic on every call that we host on Fridays. So what would you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's coaching models around focusing on what the real problem is, the fire and smoke model, right? Sometimes they'll give us that answer and we chase the smoke instead of digging in and getting to the fire, right? Because you can't get rid of smoke until you put out the fire. Yeah. And this comes up a lot on our role play calls. Yeah. And it's intentional. right? They don't want to. Diana Koska was also really good at saying, as well as Tony, that people will hide where we don't go. And so sometimes to get to the root of the problem, if you've got that gut feeling that you need to ask a certain question, ask for permission and ask the question.
Mhm. Your mindset in the conversation is crucial as well, because if you're going in as an interrogator, they will shut down. Come in with curiosity. There's another book I have productivity coaches read that's called Coach the Person, Not the Problem. And the whole crux of that book is about, instead of tackling the problem as coaches and as leaders, we should be, imagine there's a problem, right? Rather than we're looking at the problem and the client's looking at the problem and we're attacking the problem together, that's going to create tactical solutions, strategies, very surface level stuff. Instead, we as leaders, we want to look at the client while the client looks at the problem. That empowers them to overcome their own issues, and it helps us understand their thinking process, right? When they're not doing something, in all likelihood, it's because there is a thinking or a behavior pattern that is not serving them. And until they look at that through a different lens, from a different perspective, they're not going to overcome it. For example, let's say somebody doesn't feel comfortable calling their sphere because they don't want to sound salesy. The wrong approach is to say, well, here's this, let's practice this script. Let's do this together till you feel comfortable. The right approach is to dig in a little bit deeper. Well, tell me what you think about salesy. What's coming up for you when you think about a salesperson? What is that? And what are the qualities that you don't like? And helping them see that, salesy is a mindset. Salesy is that it is a way of thinking and a way of being that, unless they step into that, they're not going to be that way, right? The better way is to be a consultant, to be a partner in helping them create solutions, those types of things. So helping them look at their mindset is really crucial in this. If you're looking for training in this area, obviously there's amazing, coaching skills camp and MAPS models course and a lot of those. And another book that I think will help in, especially with the emotional side of things, is the book Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins. Does a great job of explaining emotions and what they are communicating to us. So, whole long tangent there on a short point. Leah, anything to add or any questions?
No, I love that. I imagine that there will be are there any questions from the audience before we move on? And if not, there will be time at the end too. I think this in particular, we could have a whole call on this one point alone.
I was going to say, this is 6 years in the making of my journey of mastery of coaching. So I didn't think we would really, nail it down in 20 minutes. Amy, you had asked, what was the book? I mentioned Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins. I mentioned Coach the Person, Not the Problem by Marsha Reynolds. And then I've also mentioned, it's behind me here, this blue one, The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungee Stainer, or I'm probably butchered his name, but that's it. And if you're going to start with any of those books, I would say start with The Coaching Habit. I think it does a great job of setting the framework that some of these other books build on. Yeah.
Hey, Matt, I do have one question real quick. At the beginning of the lead with curiosity, you said if somebody isn't performing, it's either a skill problem or a tactical. It said performance, there's like an equation.
Yeah, performance equals potential minus interference. And so it's either skill set or it's mindset. So skill set is the tactical, and it could be that they just don't have the right script. It's possible. I'm not saying that it's never that way. More often than not, it's interference. More often it's, I know what I need to do, but there's this giant obstacle that's standing in my way, and I don't know how to overcome that. That help? Awesome. Number 7, call in reinforcements. Okay. A lot of times it is very difficult to coach people that we are in charge of. And that's not a bad thing. It's by design, right? In order for us to be in charge of somebody, we have to have an element of authority. Coaching from authority isn't necessarily the best energy, right? It's about being a partner and giving them the freedom and space to discuss what they want. As leaders, we don't necessarily get to do that. So if you find that you have people that you're really struggling connecting with, it might just be the fact that there's a hierarchy that they can't really get around, right? If they believe, rightly or wrongly, that their vulnerability might cause them to potentially lose their position on the team, they are going to hide as much vulnerability as they can in the process. And so find a coach who could work with them, give them a space to be able to say what they want. And we have to understand that as leaders, sometimes that is them complaining about us. And that's okay, right? A lot of times our complaints are just our mind attempting to make sense of what doesn't make sense, right? Like, I know for me, I'm an external processor. So there's a lot of times I'll complain to my wife about something, and it's not necessarily that I'm really upset about it. It's that I need to talk it out. I need to look at it from different angles and figure out, how does this puzzle piece fit into my context of what I know? They may not feel comfortable doing that with you being their boss. So you might have to bring in another coach. Look at productivity coaches, look at MAPS coaches, depending on their level of production. Find somebody, maybe that's somebody else on the team instead of you coaching them. The other aspect of this that's important to remember is we cannot be a prophet in our own house. Sometimes you will say things to your people over and over and over again that they just don't seem to grasp. And then all of a sudden they take a class, or they go to a family union breakout, or they talk to someone else, and then they come back to you and say, I heard this amazing idea and it's so great. And it's what you've been telling them for 2 years. Breathe. If an emotion is coming up for you, if a feeling is coming up for you in that moment, that is your ego. Let it go. Go full Elsa on it with Frozen and just let it go, right? Does it really matter whose idea it was? At the end of the day, it's that they have the idea and they're taking the action. That's another reason why giving advice doesn't work, because it's not their idea, right? Leah, I said that you'd said if you have anyone with kids experience that, well, you tell a kid what to do, they'll either do it begrudgingly or they won't do it at all. But if you get them to think it's their idea, like I got a 3-year-old right now, I am in the midst of chaos. And that little guy, unless I can get him to decide that he wants to put his shoes on, he will not put on his shoes. So I either have to surfboard carry him out and put on his shoes later, or I get him to think it's his idea. And then when he does it, he's on board. Am I calling your agents 3-year-olds? Maybe. I don't know. They might be. Many of them could be. Who knows? Either way, if getting them exposed to different voices, getting them exposed to different ideas, different coaches, that can help solidify what you need to communicate with them. Because as much as we want to be the source of all knowledge and solutions within our team, we just don't get to be that. Bill, anything to add?
Yeah, it reminds me of the saying that no person can step into the same river twice.
Yeah.
Right. Because as a river flows, it's pushing things around on the floor of the river, it erodes the banks. But the biggest difference is the person that stepped in the river the second time. They're not the same person. So you could be preaching these things to them on a regular basis, but they just weren't ready to hear it. And so now if they've heard it from somebody else, their mind has gone, oh, gosh, you know what? Maybe Matt was right.
Yep.
And now all of a sudden it's a great idea. So yeah, just understand they're growing. The 3-year-old analogy is a great analogy, because when you get your license, you've all you've done is gotten through kindergarten. Now it's time to start learning.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
Love that.
Exactly. And my last point in all this, I think I said I had 7. I lied. I have 8. Know when to throw in the towel. There's going to be some people that just aren't going to be a good fit on your team. And that's okay. That doesn't mean you failed. That doesn't mean they failed. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. It is what it is. I will say this. I have rarely found bitterness, anger, sarcasm, any of those types of outward projections of emotions. They rarely go away. If you've got somebody on your team who's just sitting back and not really listening to what you're saying, not really paying attention, that type of energy spreads. And while I'm not suggesting that is grounds for termination immediately, dig in, don't ignore it. Have a one-on-one conversation in which you are truly coming from curiosity and digging in with them. And if you find that there isn't really a way to overcome that, then it might be best to part ways. They're not going to just suddenly like you better. They're not going to suddenly like you because their production changes, right? We got to know when to throw in the towel. Be fair, be transparent, be decisive, and be permanent. Be fair from the standpoint of your standards are completely solid and they either are meeting the standards or not. Be transparent in the process. Don't just, oh, you violated the standard last week, therefore, no. If there's a violation of standard, it happens immediately. If somebody doesn't show up to one of your morning meetings, you call them the minute that meeting is done. You don't wait till the afternoon or the next day, right? They need immediate feedback. Be decisive. If it's time to let them go, no amount of talking and bargaining is going to be the difference there. And be permanent. Rarely does somebody not working out on the team suddenly work out 6 months later, right? If they didn't work out on the team, they didn't work out on the team, and it's just not a good fit. Unless something major and substantial happens in their life that completely changes everything for them, they're probably going to show up the same way. You know, it's kind of like going back to an ex. Maybe 1 in 100 does that work. More often that doesn't work. And so we just have to accept the fact that, hey, we gave it a shot, we gave it a run. I wish you nothing but the best of luck, and it is what it is. So I'm going to stop talking. I'd love to hear some feedback. Bill, Leah, if you have anything to add, any questions from the group.
Yeah, open it up. We've got about 6 minutes. Matt has another engagement. We're going to be respectful of his time because he graced us with his presence here. I think this is the nicest I've ever been to you, Matt. We normally rib each other a ton. So this is
it's
a
weird.
Great change, isn't it?
Am I in trouble?
No, not at all. Okay. I will say one thought that does come to mind. You don't have to have a massive team to institute this stuff. You could be a party of one. You could be a party of yourself and a partner, yourself and your wife, whatever it might be, and hold yourself to these same standards. Right. So just a thought there. What other thoughts, questions do we have? I love the 7-point plan. It makes it so easy to consume.
Well, 7 plus 1.
We got a bonus point. You're right.
Bonus point. Yes.
There's no questions, no thoughts, no issues with what Matt said. No one's thinking in the back of their minds, yeah, that all sounds great, but I'm not doing that. I'm leading with the hammer.
This guy's full of it.
Yeah.
I wish he'd stop talking so I can get back to my day. Maybe something like that.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to hold you for the sake of holding you. This is per usual recorded. And as you guys know, those of you that work with me as a client, I take copious notes. So you will have notes and the recording sent out. If you are unable to fully tune in, I will single you out and make sure that you listen to it. And otherwise, if there's someone else on your team that you're sitting in for, maybe your director of operations does some of these accountability style conversations, maybe your director of sales, whoever, make sure that they get this recording, okay?
And I'd like to throw out that I am more than happy to have a conversation with anybody individually. If you're struggling with somebody on your team and you just need a different perspective, I mean, obviously Leah is amazing. And, you know, I dig a lot into the psychology and the mindset pieces of agents. And so, you know, I'd be happy to take a look at whatever's happening from a different perspective. And if I can be of help in any way, my email is just my first name dot last name at kw.com. So Matthew.Koller@kw.com. And feel free to include that in the notes that you send out, Leah.
Doing it now. And I will say too, that I have that call that Bill and Matt host for PCs. I have that link. I've shared that with some of you before in the past. If you're ever interested in kind of sharpening that edge, let me know and I can get you that link.
It's geared towards productivity coaches, but it's all conversations that I'm sure you experience in the, you know, I don't know what to say, or I don't want to sound salesy, or, you know, this person did this to me and now that threw off my week and I couldn't lead generate, and whatever it is, we dig into a lot of those different things, and we do specific role plays on coaching questions that you might ask and avoiding the tactical. And so, yeah, anybody who would like to join that call is more than welcome to join us. It's actually really easy to get to. It's actually right after this call. So it's every Friday at 11 Central, 12 Eastern. I'm not going to go through all the time zones. And the way to access it is to go to pcroleplay.com. And that will take you to the Zoom link.
Love it.
So
Love it.
Join, you're welcome.
Thank you for your time. This was outstanding. I appreciate it, Matt.
Of course. And happy to be back at a later month as well. So if we want to dig in on some deeper topics.
Happy to bring you back. You better be careful what you wish for on that one.
Sounds good. Thanks.
All right, guys. Take care. Happy
Thanks, Matt.
weekend.
That was great.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.